This training is presented by the California Student Aid Commission. Welcome to our Middle Class Scholarship 2.0 Training Module Series. This is Module 4, Corrections. This module will cover the following MCS topics: how to report corrections, annual versus term level corrections, changes to eligibility, and helpful resources. Campuses have two ways to report corrections within web grants. The first is directly on the online roster using the MCS Display Roster page. This is a great option for schools with small rosters or when making corrections to an individual student. We will walk through this manual process in the next few slides. The second method is through a batch upload process using the MCS payment roster file. For a walkthrough of uploading an MCS file, please refer to the MCS Training Module 2, Enrollment Files. In that module, we go through the step-by-step process of uploading an MCS enrollment file to web grants. The process to upload a payment roster file is the same, other than selecting the payment file type here. The current MCS processing schedule by CSAC is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights. As you can see here, Monday and Wednesday nights are reserved for payments and corrections only. Friday nights also include the processing of enrollment files for new MCS awards. Now we will walk through the process of posting a correction directly in web grants. First, start at the MCS Display Roster page. After pulling up your student's record, scroll down to Transaction Type. After clicking the Correction button, two bubbles will appear. Selecting the Annual Data bubble will allow you to make annual level corrections to this student's record. This drop-down menu allows you to make annual eligibility updates for SAP, enrollment, being over the asset ceiling, and so on. We will talk more about annual eligibility changes later in this module. These annual fields will also open up for changes if you select an annual correction. Some fields may be labeled as FTI, or Federal Tax Information. Information provided in any fields labeled as FTI must be highly protected and confidential. Here is an example of posting an annual level MCS correction in real time. Under Transaction Type, click Correction, then select Annual Data. This will open up the Eligibility Change drop-down menu where you can select your reason for the annual correction. In this example, we will select Eligibility from the drop-down menu, which will allow us to make corrections to any of the fields on the right. If you make a change to total income, you must include the ICER transaction number below. Otherwise, any annual changes to cost of attendance or other aid will impact all MCS eligible terms for the year. Next, we will walk through the process of making a correction to a specific term. Term level corrections can be made by selecting Correction under Transaction Type and then clicking Term Data. You have two options for making term level corrections. The first is a change to fees. Under Adjustment Reason Code, select Fees from the drop-down menu. This allows you to make changes to term-specific cost of attendance amounts here. When you see numerical values in red font and square brackets, this means that these are the current values on the student's record. In this example, the student's current cost of attendance for the term is $13,274. We are trying to make a correction to make the cost of attendance $15,000. Any corrections once processed by CSAC will update these values in red. Finally, make changes to other aid by selecting Eligibility from the Adjustment Reason Code drop-down menu. This allows you to update any of the financial aid fields here. You can update as many fields as needed. In this example, we are only making changes to federal aid. However, you can make changes to the other aid fields as well, all within the same correction transaction. Here is a term level correction in real time. After selecting Correction and Term Data, scroll down to the Term section. In this example, the student has already been paid for fall. However, no payments have been posted for spring. I'm going to select Eligibility under Adjustment Reason Code, which allows me to make corrections to other aid fields. I will use the Fees option if making a correction to Cost of Attendance. Please note that when making a correction to a term that already has a payment posted, will cause that payment to go into recertify status. We will talk more about recertify status in the next module. Here are the general rules for MCS corrections, whether you are uploading a payment roster file or making corrections directly within web grants. Correction and payment transactions may be submitted within the same file, but not for the same student record. If the same student record is submitted for a correction and a payment, the system will only apply either just one or may possibly reject both transaction types. When submitting a correction for a student, you may only submit an annual level correction or a term level correction within the same batch file. Annual and term level corrections cannot be submitted for the same student record in the same file. Otherwise, both transactions will be rejected. When possible, please follow the correction process hierarchy to determine which correction to submit first. Multiple term level corrections are allowed within the same week. We will discuss the correction process hierarchy on the next slide. Term level corrections may only be submitted for open terms. And finally, schools can delete their correction or payment transactions before they've been processed by CSAC, but not after. When a student has been awarded MCS, but new information is available that may affect their eligibility or their award amount, the school must follow the correction process to have CSAC recalculate that student's award. When submitting changes, you should report them in the following order. First, annual level changes. These could be made to total cost of attendance, total income, or other aid that could potentially impact the student's MCS award eligibility and award amount. These changes should be submitted before any term level changes or payment transactions. Second are term level changes. These could be changes to institutional aid, Cal Grant, or federal aid. All of these changes should be made prior to reporting payments. Finally, payments should only be applied after award information has been verified as accurate. Schools can update a student's overall MCS eligibility directly in web grants or in the payment roster file. By reporting one of the eligibility codes listed here in red, the student is considered to be no longer eligible for MCS unless other information is received by CSAC. The student's MCS award will be withdrawn and the student will be removed from the roster. Refer to the MCS Handbook for further information on eligibility changes. Let's look at an example of an annual eligibility change. In this example, the school has determined that the student is not eligible for MCS for the entire year. Select the Correction and Annual Data options under Transaction Type. Under Annual Data, select one of the following options for eligibility change: post-baccalaureate, not meeting SAP, not enrolled, over the asset ceiling, or other ineligible reason. Selecting one of these options will withdraw the award and remove the student from your school's roster. Please note, the transaction will be rejected if the student has any existing reconciled payments on file for the academic year. WebGrants has a feature that allows schools to update a student's status for each term. For example, a student who has already been awarded MCS as a fall-only student but has decided to continue their enrollment in the spring can be updated directly in WebGrants by adding a term. This replaces the previous method of the school withdrawing the initial award and then re-uploading an enrollment file with a new student status. When a student's attendance status changes, a term level correction can be made to the cost of attendance fields to either add or remove a term. Please note, annual level corrections to cost of attendance values will not update the student status. The correction must be made at the term level. To add a new term, submit a term level correction to the cost of attendance that updates the value from $0 to the actual cost of attendance amount for that term. Be sure to also update all other aid fields accordingly. This will trigger the system to re-evaluate the MCS award for that term and update the student's enrollment status. Field number 9 of the enrollment file layout and field number 63 of the payment roster file layout have been updated to reflect these changes. Here is an example of a student whose status is changing from fall only to a fall spring student. To award a new term, submit a term level correction to the cost of attendance field from $0 to the corresponding dollar amount for that term. Be sure to also update other aid fields accordingly. Doing this will trigger the system to reevaluate the MCS award and update the student status from fall only to a fall spring student. To remove a term, submit a term level correction with a $0 value for that term's cost of attendance. This will trigger the system to re-evaluate the MCS award and update the student's status. If there is a prior payment on file for that term, the existing payment will go into recertify status for the institution to update to a $0 payment. Please note that if all terms are changed to a $0 cost of attendance amount, the student will become ineligible and the award will be withdrawn from your school's roster. For more middle class scholarship resources, be sure to visit our MCS webpage for schools. There you will find the comprehensive MCS handbook, enrollment file layouts, payment roster file layouts, and other output data layouts. Thank you for watching Module 4 of our Middle Class Scholarship Training Module series.